The final, and I reckon most beautiful stop in Afghanistan. It's also the last stop of the entire trip, and what a place to cap it off. This city is brilliant. This is Herat in western Afghanistan, 700 miles, 1,000 kilometers I've traveled from Kabul via Kandahar to get here. Now only 80 miles or so from Iran, so we've come a long way. So kicking off at the city's Great Mosque, also known as the Friday Mosque. This has been around for a long time. It's now one of the oldest and biggest in the whole region, and during its lifetime it's been through plenty of destruction and reconstruction, but now stands as absolutely the most stunning sight in the whole city. Look at it, it's magic. This place is absolutely stunning. The patterns, the colours, the size of it, magnificent. Really magnificent. In the case of this specific visit, it is actually now itikaf in this mosque. That's when people in Sharia law, Islamic law, they come and spend a long time in the mosque. I think it's 10 days where they stay in the mosque the whole time towards the end of Ramadan, leading up to Eid, to worship, to read, to learn, to get closer to Allah. So a lot of people sleeping in here. This big open marble courtyard also gives you a very nice place to sit and admire, as the locals often do. It's always like a restful, relaxing place. That's what it's designed for. If you're not familiar, then something that Islam does really well in its architectural design, its decorations of buildings, is patterns, symmetry, colours, mosaics, things like that, because in Islam it's forbidden to depict any animate being, whether it's people or animals, and so you'll never see anything like that in a mosque, unlike Christianity, where like in a church you'll see stained glass of biblical scenes, let's say, or the Sistine Chapel with Adam and God and things like that. You'll never see that in a mosque. And so they dedicate all their time to making fantastic, intricate patterns everywhere, and this building is a cracking example of that. There's probably one person in the whole world, my dad, who will remember a video that I made in Uzbekistan maybe 7 or something years ago, a long time ago, where there was actually a mosque of a very similar style to this with animals on it. So, okay, they exist very rarely. That's a very specific exception to the rule. But usually it's completely forbidden in Islam. And so these kind of brilliant patterns are born. Just like a lot of historical buildings in the area, and specifically in Afghanistan, this has undergone reconstruction a couple of times. Sometimes because of Genghis Khan, sometimes because of earthquakes, in this case the Soviets and other recent conflicts. And as you can see behind me, some of that is ongoing now to restore it to its former glory. Don't you just find bits like this really satisfying with how exactly symmetrical it is? What a cool building. And then as we pass through these long corridors to exit, you can see the exterior is just as glorious. Now, something possibly off topic, but maybe actually related. I recently started watching Wes Anderson films, and he seems to focus a lot on composition and colour, and I do the same thing when I'm taking photos of places. And maybe inherently there's something in me that really appreciates those two factors. And for me, I think Islamic architecture, buildings like this, tick those boxes. Maybe there's something in that. 2,000 miles, more than 3,000 kilometres covered since we kicked off in China. What a route, what a journey. I think this is video 8 out of 8, the last of the lot. It is a good place to finish off the trip. Herat, it's a very cool city. It's definitely my favourite in Afghanistan for a number of reasons. It has some cool history like the Friday Mosque. There's some other bits we'll see later on, but there is a completely different feeling to this city when compared with Kabul or Kandahar. As you might have seen in the last 2 videos, I really enjoyed both those cities for different reasons. But what I will say, the past couple of days in Herat, it is firstly a lot less chaotic than Kabul. There's still some mayhem around, you'll see that as we walk about the place today, but there are 10 times fewer people here. Kabul, 5 million, here is about 500,000, and it's a lot less conservative and a lot less tense, if that's the right word, than Kandahar. There's less military presence, around the place. There are more women on the streets that are a bit less covered up, let's say, and it feels like there are far fewer eyes on you when you're walking around on your own, at least if you look like I do. So a bit more of a chill place, really. Those differences could be partly down to the Persian influence. Like I said earlier, we're pretty close to Iran, and it is actually a Persian speaking city for the majority of people, which is different to the other places we've visited so far. There's this nice park with a handful of rides that some people seem to be enjoying. I'm not saying it's the greatest I've ever seen. I mean, I say it's less conservative. I've just noticed that the rides in this park I'm walking around, on this one the faces are blacked out, which is pretty creepy, and on this central thing with these swans or geese and this horse, all their heads have been chopped off. That might be a result of the Taliban coming to power, not being allowed to depict any animals or humans like faces, so they've just chopped them off. We saw a bit of this as well in Kandahar with some street art with the faces scratched out as well, so maybe not that much less conservative, but it does definitely feel a bit less strict when you're out and about. I've got to say, one consistent theme is that trying to cross a road here is as much of a risk to life as everywhere else in Afghanistan. And there are still miles and miles of shopping places, markets. You can buy anything you want here. But the streets themselves are a bit more chill. And you also see a bigger range of outfits. Some people are even wearing jeans. Not many, but it does happen. And a lot of blokes are just wearing the basic shalwar kameez, which is what I'm wearing, without all of the seemingly mandatory accessories that we saw in Kandahar, the turban, the hat, everything else. So a lot easier to blend in if that's what you're after. Still yet to see a single person, adult or child, wearing glasses in my now 8 days in Afghanistan. And my need for a trim has reached critical status. So definitely not the perfect disguise, but much less standouty than you might be in Kandahar. And for the women, like I said, not everyone is totally covered, including eyes and everything. You might still have to wear a headscarf if you come in here, but a little bit more free than you might be in other parts of Afghanistan. And around here we have our next stop, the Citadel of Herat. This enormous structure, and it is enormous, is credited as the oldest building in the city. Dates back as far as 330 BC, also with Alexander the Great coming through and conquering the place, a bit like Kandahar. He built the fort that stood here originally all that time ago, and then for the 2,300 years that have followed until now, a fortification of one kind or another has stood here on the very same foundations. Going down to wherever this mysterious and very steep staircase takes me. This whole place is like a maze with all different levels, inside, outside, and these corridors are a very welcome break from the sun. It is scorching out there today. 31 degrees Celsius, by the way, today. It's only bloody March. That should be illegal, shouldn't it? I find myself darting between really tall things and finding some cover just to get out of the sun. It is a really cool thing, this. It's a good way to look at what ancient Herat might have looked like once upon a time, although this is by no means original. This has had a very tumultuous history and has been extensively renovated a couple of times, even in recent history. Firstly in the 70s and again between 2006 and 2011. So really recently, hence why it looks so new. It is really new. But, like I said, a good pointer, I think, to the history of the area. I say it looks new. These stairs, well, they're not there anymore. They didn't last very long, did they? As far as I can find, the first time this was ever open to outside visitors was 20 years ago. That's it. Until then, whenever there was something standing here, which we'll touch on in a second, it was used as a seat of power or as a military garrison or as a prison. 20 years ago, they finally started letting people in. By the way, when I say it's new, I don't mean it's been built from scratch to look like this. Some bits have been rebuilt, but most of it has just been very heavily renovated to try and respect its kind of original form. The original form of which was built sometime in the 1400s. That was after Genghis Khan came through and pillaged the place. You know, it's funny because I only actually associate the word pillage with Genghis Khan, nobody else. But he came through and destroyed everything, just like he did in most of this part of the world. After he was done, Timur came through and did more of the same, so it was extra destroyed. And then in the 1400s, it started to get rebuilt and took on a form similar to what we see here today. There really are just stairs and different levels and random little rooms everywhere in here. And then, after having clung on to life for 2 millennia, the final downfall of the place nearly came from the Herat army itself. The commander of the army decided to move the military base from here to somewhere else, and so ordered its total demolition so they could move it. And it nearly went ahead until the king stepped in and said, "You've got no chance, pal." But then it was abandoned. It fell into a bit more disrepair, worse condition, until the renovation effort started a bit later. But it was nearly destroyed by its own army. How about that? Isn't it funny that for thousands of years, people spent lifetimes building citadels, castles, fortresses like this? The amount of effort it must have taken, even gathering the materials, never mind transporting it, carving it into the right shape, putting it all together without any real tools. It must have been a horrific amount of work for so long. And then eventually technology just ruled them all obsolete. I think it was cannons that got really good and just made them pretty pointless as defences because they could just blast straight through them. After all this time, and now they're just here to look at as a bit of history, really. Not much practical use at all. It's a bit wounding, really, isn't it, for all the people that put effort in. Anyway, still pretty cool to look at. And now we're on the outside. You can see what the original pattern would have looked like when it was rebuilt in the 1400s. This design, this Kufi script, this light blue, dark blue, white kind of pattern, that originally would have covered the entire exterior of the citadel, but most of it has fallen away. That's the only bit that's left. You can see when you're walking around little glints of turquoise, of dark blue, but not many. That's the best preserved bit. It really does feel extraordinarily hot today. Do you remember when it was -12 in Tashkurgan with 8 layers on, or -30 at the top of the Kunjarab Pass? No, me neither, or at least I can't imagine it. I've got to say, 60 degrees is a serious swing in temperature for one trip, and it's not easy to pack for in one backpack. I suppose in places like this you've got no choice. You can't wear shorts or even short sleeves, so you've just kind of got to get on with it, but it's a big change. You know, earlier when I said there's sometimes a bit of mayhem, well, I think it's upon us. I suddenly feel really quite unwell. My nose and my throat really sore. That's horrible. But it's the last day, we push on. While we mooch towards the final historic stop of the day, I want to chat about the transport in Afghanistan, because it's actually really easy. The buses between cities, for example, look like this. They're gigantic, comfortable, dead clean. In fact, you're not even allowed to take your shoes on the bus. You've got to be barefoot or in socks, just like a house, so it stays really clean. The roads are mostly in pretty good condition. They're smooth and they're straight, so you have really comfortable journeys between cities. I moaned quite a bit earlier in the trip about the bus from Gilgit to Islamabad because it was the worst in the world and it was horrific. So I just want to give Afghanistan some credit where it's due. It is much better here. And then things like taxis, tuk-tuks, motorbikes, really easy, and no one's tried to overcharge me or even charge me at all in some cases. So transport as a whole is good, it's easy. We appear to have encountered an inconvenience, and by that I mean a locked gate and a big fence and wall surrounding the thing we're trying to visit, we're looking to get into the Mosalla complex, but it appears to be out of bounds. Yeah, I've tried a few different gates, I've been around a couple of different ways. It seems official, there is no way in, so I suppose we're gonna do this through the bars. I feel like I'm visiting a mate in jail, except my mate is a 600-year-old tower of stone. Anyway, I'll do my best. So this whole complex was originally built in the 1400s, about the same time, and in the same style, by the way, as the mosque from earlier and the Citadel as well, in the Timurid style. So it would have been totally covered in turquoise, blue and white mosaic patterns. And there are a couple of elements to this. The first of which is the Gawar Shad mausoleum, that dome-shaped thing in the background. And that is pretty much as close as we're going to get, because these gates, which as far as I can tell you would usually pass through to have a look, were all locked on the day that I visited, so it'll have to do from here. So Gawar Shad, after whom it is named, was the chief consort of a Timurid ruler. The Timurids were in charge at the time, and it's built in their typical style as well, and along with the 4 gigantic minarets over here make up the modern day Mosalla complex. There is actually a 5th minaret. This one, I'm not really sure what's happening to this, whether it's being renovated or just kept alive, but it does make you think how hard it must have been to build it in the first place if it takes this much real estate just to keep it standing today. And nowadays, one of the best vantage points is, well, as far as I could find, in this little residential bit, and they're just kind of plonked there with no real way to get up close and personal. But of course that attracted some attention from these kids. They were happy, they were friendly, they were just really curious. I don't get the impression that they see too many Westerners on these particular streets, but if you squeeze through this fence you get a pretty good view of the minarets, and these would have formed a gigantic mosque, even bigger than the Friday mosque that we saw earlier. And in the background there is the mausoleum making up the complex. So once upon a time, these minarets, the few that still stand, would have formed part of an enormous mosque, way bigger than the Friday mosque we saw earlier, which survived until 1885, which is when the British Indian Army, along with the Afghan government, agreed to destroy it on purpose, so the invading Russians had less cover to hide behind. And that's what's left. By the way, it is quite funny that something so important and historic is just kind of in the middle of this very understated neighbourhood. It's not really a particular attraction. So I suppose now I'm walking back towards the city centre. It's not far off Scran o'clock. Maybe it's time for some parting thoughts from Afghanistan and the trip as a whole, actually. First of all, I'm absolutely knackered and apparently now a little bit ill. I really feel quite unwell. But what a magical adventure it's been. Think about all the different cultures, cuisines, weathers, languages, peoples, landscapes, everything that we've seen. We've travelled a long way in a part of the world that is not particularly easy to travel around. I also deliberately timed the whole trip to fall during Ramadan. It's a month that I fast for as well, so on certain days like today when it's really hot, pretty tricky to not eat or drink and try and cool down, but it's part of the self-discipline of the month. And even when it was really cold and you really want a coffee or a hot chocolate or tea, you can't. So that's been challenging in some ways, but rewarding in others as well. It's felt like a pretty special time to be travelling around various Muslim parts of the world during the religion's holiest month. I think you see maybe a different side to these countries that you might outside of Ramadan, as well as being that little bit more magical for traveller during this month in this kind of place. It does also ask some logistical questions, you know, with hotel availability, public transport times, shop and restaurant opening times. It all changes during this month, which has been, you know, an additional challenge, but again, for me, totally worth it. I love being around it all, and I really admire the communal sense in Islam and Muslim countries, the generosity, the helpfulness of the people, and the absolute devotion to one's belief. And I think those core values have got stronger as the trip's gone on, from China to Pakistan and now Afghanistan. I think we've seen more and more of all that. Anyway, aside from the religious aspect, I think it's just been a pretty interesting trip, hasn't it? I've enjoyed it at least. Should we get some scran? So the plan of action here is just to get a whole range of street food things, like from this bakery, get some fruit as well, try to be at least a little bit nutritious, but I was absolutely starving, so went with a feast. In case you're wondering, this is what streets look like at this time of night. People start to wheel out food carts. It's nearly time to break fast. Remember, this is being filmed during Ramadan. Really wanted to get one of these. This is a Balani. I've had one of these earlier in the week. Really traditional Afghan bread. You'll see these everywhere. And I also got a wrap from this bloke, some chips, some looks like sausage, some kind of meat, some fried stuff in there as well, and some salad. So ended up with a pretty decent haul actually, and as you can see the sun is going down, so just heading back to the hotel in perfect time to break my fast. Okay, so for one last time, here is the spread. I got this kind of wrap thing that has some meat, some veg in it, some fried things, maybe they're like samosas or something. That cost me 60. This bread thing is a really traditional Afghan food called a balani. It's a bread with like stuff inside it as well. Then I ransacked a bakery place. The guy gave me this for free actually. The guy said this was a gift, so he didn't want any money for that. The balani was 20 and 2 bananas were also 20. That's 100 Afghani, which is the equivalent of about £1.10. That is the feast. So for a total of about £1.10, let's have it. I feel like this wrap is most important to eat first. It's served hot, so. Yeah, that's good. It's got chips in it as well, which they're a vibe. You don't get many chips around here. Yep, the wrap passes the test. Now the balani. I've had one of these earlier in the week. These are really satisfying. They smell like pancakes. Don't know how well you can see it, but inside there's like potato, cheese, all sorts in there. So it's savoury. It smells like a pancake, but it's a savoury thing. Really, really satisfying. This is the fat bit in the middle, where it's folded. Good scran. By the way, the wrap came in old newspaper, a bit like fish and chip shops used to do in the UK, and this is a closer up of the balani. This looks like an omelette, but is actually a bread thing. And this is what we got from the bakery chap who gave us these for free. No idea if any of these are particularly traditional, but they all look pretty good. This looks like it's going to be profiterole type deal, and I've got no idea what to even expect from this. I mean, it looks like it might have a bit of pistachio on it, the green stuff, so I tried that first, and really weird actually. I mean, it didn't have any specific flavour, it just tasted a bit like sticky and a bit sugary, like a thick pastry. This was not a profiterole. This turned out to be quite a shortbread-like texture, a bit dusty actually. Really, yeah, it was nice, but it wasn't as squishy as I expected. This was a gingerbread thing dipped in chocolate. I mean, win-win. Pretty happy with this. And lastly, also not as squishy as I expected. This was almost like a sweet sausage roll. I think that's like chocolate or something inside. And the banana was pretty banana-y. I don't know what I can tell you. Oh, stocks are replenished. And I think that's about that. The journey's not quite done. I've got to get 4 flights to get home to England from here. It's going to be a mission. It takes 2 full days. But in terms of the recorded stuff, I reckon that's about it. I know I've said this bit at the end of the past couple of video series that I've made, but as time goes on, it does get likelier and likelier that this could be my last ever video upload, the last ever run of videos. I'd like it not to be. If the chance arises, I'd be buzzing to do it all again. I always really enjoy making them. I like sharing them with the world, and I really appreciate all the feedback, the interaction, the comments and everything, and hopefully people have found them interesting. Maybe these ones, maybe some in the past, but been uploading for about 8 years now, I think, to this channel. It's never been a full-time thing. It's just been whenever it fits in between work with holiday allowances and stuff. So, you know, I've had a blast, but it could well be the last of them. If it is, I just want to cover it off and say I appreciate you all. I know these aren't the most viewed videos in the world, but I'm really glad that some people enjoy them, find them helpful or whatever. So cheers for joining me along the journey, or other journeys, or all the journeys maybe you've been around from the beginning. But anyway, it's been a vibe. I've had an ace time, and if we can, let's do it again sometime. But I am getting old. Life moves on. Let's see, shall we? Fingers crossed, let's see. But if not, I guess all I can really say is cheers, chaps. See you in a bit.